I am painfully uncomfortable with the unpredictability of the future, or anything in the realm of the unknown for that matter. I could spend hours deliberating over the menu of a restaurant in which I haven't even stepped foot, dwelling on whether or not my analysis of one of Shakespeare's lengthy monologues is worthy enough to even contribute to the class discussion, or overanalyzing my every social encounter. I crave answers and reassurance from those who have experienced what I have not. I seek out wisdom from self-help books, teachers, podcasts, the lyrics that make up Phoebe Bridgers' discography, my parents, those corny quotes that show up on my Instagram Explore page, and everything in between. I wouldn't say that I typically consult a group of 23-year-old boys who I've gotten to know as my older brother's goofy friends when I'm pining for any kind of direction, but you would be surprised, as I certainly was, to hear that their advice tends to be quite profound. Hi, my name is Madison Zunder, and this is my senior stage. After completing my last high school final, I made a beeline for the dean's office, greeted by Ms. Straufflis' smile, of course, to sign out and make my way to Washington, D.C. to visit my older brother Noah for the long weekend. When I finally arrived at his apartment later that day, I was greeted by his friends, most of whom I'd never even met before. We chatted about my experience as a then second-term senior. They teased me for not yet allowing myself to succumb to senioritis, and then reminisced on their time in high school as though they were nearing the age of retirement. As many of them were political science majors in college, they, naturally, discussed current events and world politics and attempted to explain their historical significance to their business major counterparts. After observing their discourse, rarely contributing at all, one of my brother's friends interrupted the conversation, turned to me, and said, "Okay, Maddie, now that we have some food in us, I think it's time for us to give you some advice on the whole college thing." They all went silent, considering what advice they could offer me at this moment, things they wish they could have been told before they embarked on their own college journey. I waited patiently, expecting them to give me genuinely thoughtful advice, considering the mature nature of the table talk that I had just witnessed seconds before. What followed, though, was a farcical, ridiculous display of their immaturity as they went back and forth playing off of each other. Unfortunately, I can't share most of their advice with you today, but I can share the more serious tidbits of guidance that followed. Even these, though, are laughable due to their utter simplicity, and they presented them to me as though they were the most insightful realizations that anyone could ever offer, as though I hadn't already come to these realizations by the beginning of my sophomore year of high school. A few months removed from this conversation, however, I've come to realize that while their tenets seem rather obvious in theory, they can sometimes prove themselves to be more difficult in practice. Their first piece of advice: read your textbook, especially for your science courses. 23-year-old boys are quite the intellectuals, I know. But they're right, and Grace Greeno can attest as well. Reading your textbook is perhaps the best thing that you can do for yourself. Whether you consult Crash Course, SparkNotes, Professor Dave Explains, or Chegg, when you're scrambling to understand the material that you missed while you were playing the Wordle or GeoGuessr or Clash of Clans during class, there's no better place to turn than your textbook. But I encourage you to read far more than your chemistry book, though I must say it makes for quite a captivating read. I, as I'm sure is true for many of us, am guilty of skimming through the SparkNotes summaries and analyses on a heavy homework night. And though they provide just enough information to not raise alarm with the grade that you receive on your reading check the following day, they don't provide the satisfaction and pleasure that comes with reading a book. Sure, I dread reading Shakespeare as much as the next person, but as Mr. Janosko reminded my class throughout the entirety of Term 2, never in your life will you again have the opportunity to consistently sit in a classroom and discuss classic literature in its entirety. So read Jane Eyre, Othello, and The Great Gatsby, and allow yourself to not comprehend a single thing that you're reading until you hear your peers analyze the text in class. Allow the elegance of the language to wash over you and steep into your own vocabulary. Their next piece of advice: understand that you are in school to learn, not merely to know the information well enough to be successful on an assessment and forget it by the beginning of the next period. I believe they phrased it as something along the lines of, it's really cool when you're in upper level courses and all of that information from your introductory courses finally starts to make sense, and then you realize that your brain can comprehend that material and that you're actually really smart. Again, quite obvious, but important to be reminded of nonetheless. If I've discovered anything about myself over the course of high school, it's this: I love to learn, genuinely. I love learning about how to draw a bulbous and round cardioid that bears no resemblance to a heart from Miss Yam, how to try and enjoy my weekend, as Mr. Grant proposes, after taking a near impossible test on IR spectroscopy, and how Benedict Cumberbatch can somehow relate to almost any conversation in an English class with Miss Weaver. As an underclassman, I assigned so much value to the letters on my report card that by the end of the year, I realized that I hadn't really given myself the opportunity to learn anything at all. I couldn't recall chemical structures, how to scan a poem and mark its stressed and unstressed syllables, or the values of the unit circle, though I'd spent hours memorizing them in preparation for those daily mini quizzes. It wasn't until Shady Side transitioned to pass-fail in March of 2020 that I was able to recognize that school is about so much more than just getting by with a good grade. It's about allowing yourself to sit in the discomfort of not understanding, realizing that it is not a reflection of your intellect if you need to seek out one-on-one support from your teachers and peers, and figuring out how to put that newfound knowledge in context beyond the classroom. I found that some of my biggest breakthrough moments in understanding the material in my classes have been sitting beside my science teachers in the Ellis Commons or my English teachers on a bench in the hallway of Rowe with a long list of pre-prepared questions beside me, engaging in a conversation that accomplishes far more than any 50-minute PowerPoint lecture ever could. As much as I think these 23-year-old boys' advice is valid enough to share with you all, I would be remiss if I did not offer my own 2 cents as well. A book that I read recently posed the question, how long does it take for a stranger to become your friend? I've been considering this question for a number of weeks, and I'm still not sure that I've reached any kind of absolute conclusion yet. For me, I would argue that it depends on the person, but for the most part, it takes a long time for me to feel secure and safe enough to bring my entire self to new relationships. If you know me at all, you would know that I'm a very reserved, introverted person, or as Miss Yam put it in one of my term comments last year, a big ball of anxiety. I've been this way all my life. My face has always turned beet red from the slightest feeling of discomfort, and then developed into an intensified hue when someone points it out, and my leg has always trembled uncontrollably when I'm in any kind of social setting. If you're at all like me, it can be difficult to let down your guard and voluntarily put yourself in a vulnerable position for the sake of developing a deeper connection with others. I used to keep people at an arm's length out of fear that they had the ability to leave my life at any moment, out of fear that my emotional attachment and investment in their well-being would destroy me in their wake. But that is no way to live, and since recognizing that, I have found so many people who have positively contributed to my life in unimaginable ways. I'm grateful to have found them over the last few months, but my biggest regret is not searching for them sooner. There are some pretty incredible people in this community, and I encourage you to seek out those hidden gems. Seek out those teachers whose passion for the subject is infectious and makes you equally excited to learn from them, and seek out peers who don't make you question the validity of your friendship, people who make you better. After all, you are merely a reflection of those with which you surround yourself. You may not be able to control what happens down the line several months in the future, though I wish you could, but you can be secure in the knowledge that your friendship brings you happiness and peace in that moment. You have the ability to cultivate and nurture your relationships, to put in the time and effort that is required to sustain them far into the future, despite the many other factors that may be out of your hands. Like the advice of my brother and his friends, this is all admittedly easier said than done. But if you can find it in yourself to open your heart and your mind, it will be worth it to make a new friend out of the kid who fell out of their chair beside you the first day of your freshman year English class, or to connect with the girl in PE fitness who is also trying to somehow fulfill all of her athletic credits and graduate without playing any actual sport at all, or to become friends with the kid you unironically exchange a dab with every time you run into them in the hallways. You are bound to find a source of happiness from these relationships, and you're bound to benefit from one another in more ways than one. And who knows, you may even find someone who's as unexpectedly well-versed in giving advice as my older brother's friends. So, how long does it take for a stranger to become your friend? However long it takes for you to let down your guard, exchange a soft smile from across the Harkness table, and ask about their day. Thank you.